Welcome in, everybody. It's been a long time. It is the Warchant.com Hoops Report. I feel like it's the M&M's commercial with Santa. Do they exist? They do exist. Alongside Ira Schoffel, the managing editor of Warchant.com. My name is Tom Lang, ESPN Radio by day, Warchant every once in a while, as in right now. So, Ira, last night there was a basketball game. It was an NCAA basketball game. It involved Florida State, and the Noles got off to a red-hot start and never stopped. They missed 17 shots from the field, 17 shots of any kind because they made all their free throws in this game. A 105-73 win over NC State. 15 days off. Any rust? Nope. It looks like the rest prevailed over the rust. Ira, your thoughts because you were in the building. Wow.
Yeah, it was really uncanny. Right off the bat, they come down. Rayquan Evans are hitting threes, and NC State was answering early, but then Florida State just kind of kept pouring it on. It really didn't matter who went in the game. I know we'll talk a little bit later about the change in the starting lineup with Scotty Barnes coming off the bench, but he comes in, he plays really well. I mean, literally anybody they put in the game, from guys, Nate Jack, who hasn't been a major contributor, just guys up and down the lineup have really contributed, really played well, played with a lot of confidence, and just dismantled NC State. I mean, you just don't see that very often in conference play. It's the highest field goal percentage for FSU in an ACC game. They shot 71% as a team. I think the previous record was 66%, which FSU set a few years ago. So it's really a remarkable performance under any circumstances, but especially, as you said, the last time we saw them play was against Clemson. They did not look very good. And then they have that 15-day break, and you wonder how that's going to affect them. And then they come out and play really their best offensive game in a long, long time.
Well, and a couple of notes on that, too. That's the first time the Noles have cracked the century mark in ACC play in about 4 years. It was back in 2017 over Clemson when they did that. And number two, Ira, I mean, this is a game leading up to it. Leonard Hamilton's words about Florida State's intensity and the willingness to get to the basket and get fouled. He brought it up before this game tipped off last night, talking about how Clemson had more of a will to get to the line, and that's why the free throw disparity was the way it was. It wasn't necessarily because of the whistle. It was because of how tough they were playing. His rhetoric was pretty tough entering this game, and I know that if you're looking at the schedule in a 3-game set, last night you have NC State. Florida State hosts North Carolina on Saturday at noon. That'll be on ESPN. And then they got to go play Louisville. So in short order, you have 3 games, and you need to have one in your back pocket in case those 2 programs play up to their potential. He was circling this game, and he wanted to see a response, a tough response from his guys, and he certainly got that last night.
Yeah, you get the sense that they really challenged these guys over that break. And it was a weird situation. They were going to play Duke, and I think they probably would have played well against Duke. They had lost 2 of those last 3. They lost to UCF. They lost to Clemson. And I think they got challenged then. I think at that point, because really in both of those games, it was the same story. Clemson and UCF both were much more physical and aggressive going to the basket offensively, as you said. We can complain about the foul calls, and there's legitimate gripes probably to a degree, but usually the officials are going to favor the aggressive team. And Florida State was not very aggressive going to the basket earlier this season. And then last night you saw it. Now it helped that NC State didn't have their big shot blocker, who's been out for a couple of games. So that certainly helped FSU's cause. But the reality is you've got a lot of guys in this team, and I know we want to talk a little bit big picture about where Florida State is through 8 games, but you have a lot of guys on this team that are still feeling their way around, filling out their new roles on this team after losing so much from last season. And I do think that they got challenged during that break. And I think one of the comments Leonard Hamilton made after the game that I thought was pretty interesting is he said, not having a game for 15 days, really all they got was criticism from us. Like it was 2 weeks of, you guys need to start doing this, you guys need to start doing that. And, certainly they responded.
Well, yeah, it wasn't perfect defensively, but it didn't need to be because Noles shot 70% for the entire game. I mean, Ira, that's probably the best shooting game you're ever going to see with your own eyes, be it a collegiate, NBA, 70% for the entire game. So, for me, one thing, as I look at a team projected forward, any point in the season, if you have a complete dud or if you have a night like last night, I know that's in you. So, in a sport like college basketball, where it's if you have a bad night, you're done, it makes you all the more nervous. Like the UCF performance would make me nervous about March Madness. But then I could fall back now on a performance like last night, a second half like the one Florida State played against Florida earlier this season, and I could say, okay, that's also in them too, because there wasn't any let up. That's the thing about last night that I would assume that the coaching staff is really proud of. When it comes to offensive production, there wasn't any let up. The next wave of guys come on, they hit their shots. You're right about Nathaniel Jack. I think he was 7 of 8 from the floor last night. But moving forward now, the challenge on Saturday is a very different one. So now that you kind of have a snapshot, a long layoff, and then one more piece of evidence, 8 games have been played. What do you think about the Noles at this point in their schedule and this point in the calendar of the season? What do you think you know, and what do you know?
I think that one of the things that game, as you said, it gave fans and media a reference point now for what's the ceiling possibly, or how good could this team be. But I think that's also important for these players. You've got a lot of guys on this team who haven't. Rayquan Evans has been in the background now for 2 years since he's been in Tallahassee. And if you remember back in the preseason last year, when he came in from junior college, Leonard Hamilton was super excited about him, but he had the setback with the injury, and he never really became the guy that Coach Hamilton said he thought he would be. He contributed here and there, but it wasn't a major part of what they did. So coming into this year, you're thinking, okay, well, maybe he's going to be that guy, but we really hadn't seen it. And part of it, and we don't have to go too far into this, but part of it was he was one of the guys that was really emotionally affected by seeing, Keontae Johnson go down for Florida. I mean, that was a traumatic experience for a lot of those players. And, I think Coach Hamilton has said that, they had to get counseling for some of the guys. And I think Rayquan Evans was one of those guys who was really affected by that. So then you have that happen. But it's funny. I was telling Corey, I think it might have been the UCF game in the pregame warmups. They were going through pregame warmups, and now they're allowed to dunk even if the refs are out there before the games. And Rayquan Evans, I didn't know it was him, but I was kind of out of the corner of my eye. I saw a guy, they're kind of doing jump shots. Somebody throws the ball off the backboard, catches it, and does a windmill dunk. And I'm like, whoa, who is that? And it was Rayquan Evans, which I didn't realize he was that dynamic of an athlete. I mean, I just haven't really seen it, but that's what they had talked about when he came in. And for him to have that performance last night, and then the way he talked about it afterwards, that he was not, you would have thought he scored 6 points. I mean, he just was not impressed by what he did. So I think for some of those guys like him, Nate Jack, to know that they can play at this level, to do it in an ACC game, I think is going to be good for them. But I do think, there's still some questions about this team. There's no doubt. I mean, defensively, I was thinking going into halftime, as well as they played, to be up by, a ton of points at halftime and to shoot the way they did, NC State was shooting like 48% at halftime, something in that neighborhood, which is abhorrent for Leonard Hamilton. He's not going to want to see that. For the game, they shot about 44%, 42% from three. So he certainly wasn't happy about the defense performance, and I think NC State missed some shots closer to the rim that maybe that would have gone in on different nights. So the defense still is a work in progress. Still has to get a lot better, especially against better teams. And some of the things you saw last night, you're not gonna get. I mean, you're not gonna get obviously 18 or 24 probably from Evans and Jack, but and also at the free throw line, they went 11 for 11. I do think they're a better free throw shooting team than what we've seen this year. But it's also important to note who went to the line last night. It wasn't Polite. It wasn't necessarily Gray. It wasn't the guys that have been struggling at the free throw line. It was your better free. If MJ Walker goes to the line, he's going to knock down free throws.
Yep.
Evans knocked down his last night as well. So Wyatt Wilkes. So some of the concerns we had a couple games ago are still there. But I think one thing to note, and I'll wrap it up with this. I know I've been going long, but if you look at Leonard Hamilton's teams through the years, they always get better and better as the year goes on. And I think that's going to be the case with this team. If you think back to last year when they got thumped by Pitt, or when they lost to Pitt, or when they got thumped by Indiana, you start wondering, what's this team going to be? Or go back to even the year they beat the loss to Michigan, the Elite Eight, the year they kind of broke through and made it to the Elite Eight. They were like 500 in the conference that year, but they got better and better and better. So I do think this team still has concerns that I'm sure, and you can rattle off some as well. But the fact that history tells us Leonard Hamilton's teams play better in February and March than they do in December and January, I think gives you a good idea of where this team maybe could go.
Well, first I'll start with Rayquan Evans, because last year, if you look at the box score, Ira, of some of those performances down the stretch, it's not like he's lighting the world on fire for 20 points or anything like that, but I remember big shots being made by Rayquan Evans last year. Lulls of games where maybe things were getting away from Florida State a little bit. An opponent of the TLC double C is, they're on a 6-0 run or something, and then you got an 18-footer, and Evans lets it go, and it's good. And you're like, oh, that's one that quells the momentum and stunts what the other team is trying to do. So I remember by the end of the season, he seemed much more comfortable in his own skin at that level, and he was comfortable enough to make big shots in big moments. And then last night, you saw the explosiveness. And I thought it was interesting that you brought up in the pregame of the UCF game that he's throwing stuff off the backboard and he's dunking. I didn't know he could go that high above the rim or do anything like that, but you saw the aggressiveness to take the ball to a spot, a predetermined spot where he wanted to get. He determined it, he dictated it, and then he finished with a runner, or he used it to kick out. The ball moved really well with Rayquan starting the game last night. Scotty Barnes obviously was on the workout bike. As the game tipped off, he was loosening up whatever was going on with his lower body, and we'll hit on that in just a second. But one thing I do know about this group is when they shoot it, it's contagious. A lot of times you see teams around the country free throw wise. It's like one night they might be 55%, another night they're 85%, and the old adage in basketball is free throw shooting is contagious. With the three-pointers with this team, I think it's just as contagious. If they're feeling it, it's not just open looks, Ira. I mean, they will generate their own looks. The ball moves around very nicely. If it's contested, it doesn't matter. Anthony Polite can go off at any moment. MJ Walker can. Saw a big three in transition from Calhoun last night after Ngome blocked one near the basket. This is a group that can avalanche you a little bit, and that would be what I'd expect a team like North Carolina or Louisville will look at on film and say, be careful, guys, because if you let up for just a moment, this is what can happen to you. But that leads me to the question about point guard and about who starts the game. Florida State has had an awful lot of success with 6 men over the last few years. And, of course, Scotty Barnes, I think if he was 100% last night, would have started. But Rayquan Evans did deliver early on last night before Scotty even entered the game. And given that Scotty came up lame towards the end of last night's, it was in the second half, he rolled up his ankle. I mean, does Florida State go back to the well again? And might this be a trend where maybe you steal some minutes with Rayquan Evans to get him going, and then you allow Scotty Barnes to come in as the team is a little bit gassed? What do you think about the point guard situation?
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. I do think that, a lot of people have asked, was it legit? Did Scotty Barnes really have an injury? You could tell when he was running around, even before the game, and then certainly when he got into the game, that he must have some sort of a tweak or something in his calf. I think Leonard Hamilton called it a strain, but he had a sleeve on his calf, and you could just tell he wasn't running the way he normally runs, wasn't quite as explosive, especially early in the game. So my guess is it is something that's been bothering. We do know it's been bothering him, kind of coming into the game, and I do think that's why he didn't start. I do think that you don't want to necessarily ask too much of a guy that really is still a young. I mean, he's only playing his 8th college basketball game. So to ask him to maybe feel like he's got to overexert himself when he's not 100% and start the game. So I think it worked out well from that perspective. But what I think they may have stumbled upon, as you said, is Ray Evans played really, really well. And I don't know that you're going to expect him to play like that again, or certainly not every night out. But if you think back to that situation with Kabengele a couple of years ago, with Fiondu Kabengele, part of the reason he came off the bench was I think that they liked Chris Kumaje they felt like Kumaje needed to be in the starting lineup. That got him going. They like to get the ball inside a little bit to him early, get him some touches. They felt like when they went to him later, if they brought him off the bench, he wouldn't have been quite as effective, whereas Kabengele probably would have been fine either way. And then you bring him off the bench after the other teams have run up and down the court a few times, and then you bring him in fresh after 3 or 4 or 5. Sometimes Kabengele, sometimes they waited a little longer than that to get him in the game. It was like just a big body blow to the other team. Like, now we got to deal with this guy. We're starting to get a little winded, and then this guy's coming off the bench. So we'll see. I do think Scotty Barnes is a unique player. I think he may want to be in the starting lineup. But if Florida State liked what they saw in that game, this is a really good opportunity. Again, assuming he's healthy. As you said, he did tweak his ankle late in that game, which I think it might be the same ankle he tweaked in December. We'll have to see how that plays out. But he may be a guy who wants to be in the starting lineup. It may not be as comfortable coming off the bench. But I think if I'm Leonard Hamilton and that coaching staff, I think you may say to him, look, you could do either. But Rayquan Evans might be better as a guy who's in the game when the ball is tipped to get him going. So let's give that another look. So we'll see. I don't think it's I don't think it was a preconceived notion that they wanted to bench Scotty Barnes or anything like that. But I think maybe they may have stumbled onto something.
Well, the ball moved well. That's one
Yeah.
thing that happened, and to me, this is something we would talk about on the radio show that I do during the week. A few years ago, when Kabengele would come off the bench for Kumaje, it was like Leonard opened the game trying to steal minutes, and it's like, how many minutes can this work? It's not that Kumaje can't play, and in some games it worked better because the mismatch of the size was just so great that Kumaje could have been out there for 12 minutes, and nothing would have slowed him down. But it was like, how many minutes can I assert myself with this rotation? Can I get those guys going before I deploy this dude for 20 to 25 minutes? Same thing with Pat Williams. So, I mean, there's precedent for it here. It's just at the point guard, it's a little bit different. But there is no doubt last night that the ball moved really well early on with Evans in the game. Another thing I know, Ira, and you mentioned this last night, you tweeted it, MJ Walker is not just a nice player. He's a really good player in a lot of facets of the game. What did you see last night that led you to make that tweet? Because, I mean, you could pull any example, I suppose, that you wanted. He was all over the court, did a little bit of everything.
Yeah, there are a couple things he did that were just like basketball plays, where he was, there was a play where he was kind of tied up near the baseline and just kind of threw the ball not to his teammate. I think it might have been to Ballstra. I'm not sure, but he didn't throw it to the player. He threw it to where he knew the player could get to that the defender couldn't get to. Just smart, savvy basketball plays that you're seeing from him. He's playing with such a comfort and such a confidence right now. Every time he lines up a three right now, I feel like it's going in. I mean, every time, and that's not just last night. It's been this season. They've figured out where he likes the ball. He's figured out not to force things. He's just a very smooth approach to the way he's playing, and then he is explosive enough to get to the rim. And then he's not a point guard, but he can handle the ball well enough. It's not like he's a guy that has to be a catch and shoot guy. He can put the ball on the ground as well. So you're just really impressed with him. The only thing he really doesn't do is rebound. It's never been part of his game. You'd like to see maybe a little bit of that at some point, but he defends, he communicates. And again, he's one of those guys I talked about earlier that even though they were key parts of this team last year, they didn't have to play this role. I mean, MJ Walker's never had to kind of be this guy, the leader, just the veteran presence and hit so many big shots. And he's really stepped up. It's been fun just watching him play.
I'll be honest, Ira, entering the season, given how hot and cold he was last year, there were games that he stole by himself. He took over, and then there were others where you're like, okay, what did
disappeared?
Yeah, I got to think about it. I got to think about some of the possessions. I was worried about the steady hand. Could he be the steady hand? There's no doubt he is at this point. And is there anybody you'd rather have at the free throw line with the game on the line on this roster than MJ Walker? I don't think there is. Two things. Number one, you mentioned rebounding, which is a great segue to the next point. But before we get there, my favorite part last night of the game was watching Ngome beat the press. Do you remember that moment? He dribbled probably 20 to 25 feet last night to help the guys get across the timeline against the press, because NC State does a good job of it. But I mean,
you started to wonder, is he going to go to the distance?
Right. You're like waiting for him. It's like, okay, I got to this spot. Now get rid of it. Nope. He's by the timeline. He's on the other half of the logo. Now he's nearly clear of the logo. He
did play. It's it's good that you brought him up, because we didn't really write about him at all in the coverage we wrote after the game, but he played really well. And I think that's the second or third time in the last maybe 4 or 5 games where he's really played well on both ends of the court. He gives them a little, he gives them the shot blocker that they've been lacking. And he's there's some subtleties to his game. I've liked him a lot more maybe than I expected when they signed him.
Yeah, in terms of his build, he looks like the aforementioned Kumaje, but
very much
there's a little bit of nasty to him. And obviously being where he is in his college career, the coaching staff saw that they wanted immediate returns out of him. They didn't sign him to be a 4-year project. They thought he could play right now. It was just the visa issues and the COVID issues with camp that held his development back. But that could be a really big 6 to 10 minutes a night that he could provide, especially if somebody gets into foul trouble. And the Post is going to be the place to watch Saturday afternoon. It's a noon tip. It's on ESPN between Florida State, North Carolina. It's at the TLC-CC. This is a much different team, Ira, than the NC State group that Florida State just trounced on Wednesday night. What do you expect to see from Florida State on Saturday against North Carolina? And obviously, it's the first of two in quick order here. It's North Carolina noon on Saturday, followed by Louisville on Monday, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. What do you expect to see on Saturday? What are you looking for?
Yeah, as you said, I mean, it is a very contrast in styles. I think Florida State's strength is on the perimeter, and you look at North Carolina. I mean, they've got to be the biggest team in the country in the post. And it's just, can Florida State hold their own on the boards? I was impressed by the way they rebounded last night. I mean, I think at halftime it was 15-6 in rebounds. Florida State was dominating NC State, but it's a completely different animal with North Carolina. So it's going to be a great test for Balsha. It's going to be a good test for Nagam, as you said. And then also Malik Osborne, who I know is somebody that you really, from talking off the air, you want to see a lot more from Malik Osborne. This is going to be a great opportunity for him because he really hasn't seemed to find his niche after a really impressive, at times, first season.
Yeah, the question is, and I don't know that it's Malik's fault. The way the rotation's going right now, with Balsa being somebody they clearly want to start the game with and want to set the tone with to move the ball around, get inside-out actions, things like that, and Rayquan Gray being as good as he's been this year, it's like, where do you stick him in that group? And he played close to the basket last year. He was forced to, but they like him as a stretch player, somebody who could shoot from the perimeter. Hasn't done that all that well so far this season. I'm not blaming Malik. It's just that's a piece that I don't know that there's a natural fit for it, but there might be on Saturday because North Carolina is exceptional at rebounding the basketball. They've got 200 offensive rebounds in 12 games. That's absurd. It's not quite as good as that team a few years ago that rebounded more than 50% of their misses, which is also, that's just mind-blowing. But they're rebounding a ton of their misses. And if you look at the synergy stats, I pulled them up. We don't have a full-fledged Hamalytics for this one, but I'll give you a couple of notes on it. Synergy hates North Carolina offensively like they do. Efficiency-wise, North Carolina is in the bottom 16% of the country. They're 323rd in transition offense. That's awful. And you would think with the athletes in North Carolina, the numbers would be a hell of a lot better than 323rd in the country in transition. But where Synergy loves them is, no surprise, in the post. Offensively, offensive rebound putbacks, defending the post down low. This is a really interesting matchup, and it's not just about Garrison Brooks, who is the preseason ACC Player of the Year. It's also about Armando Bacot. That's the guy that's been really, really efficient. He's averaging more points than Garrison Brooks is right now. I think it's close to 11-8 or 11-9, something along those lines. But the task might be tall for Florida State, and maybe it's an opportunity to see two of the post players on the floor at the same time. That's certainly one thing I'm looking for. And the last question I'll ask you, Ira, I guess, leading into the North Carolina game, like how much can you actually take from what you saw on Wednesday and move it forward to Saturday? Or is this just kind of throw that out because you're never going to shoot 70% for an entire game again?
Again, I think it's for some guys, it's good that they've just done it. Again, Ray Evans is a guy that doesn't lack confidence. But I just think it's going to be good for him to have shot that well. It's going to be good for Nate Jack to stay on the court that long. We always knew Nate Jack could shoot. The question was, could he stay on the court defensively long enough to get the opportunity? And I thought one thing that was cool with him last night, his one miss was, I think it was his one miss, was an air ball, and it was ugly. And he right away, let the coaches know, yeah, I know I should not have shot that. It was totally not within the offense. And I think what was important about those shots last night, because this is a game against North Carolina where they're going to have to win with threes. I mean, they're going to have to shoot the ball well from the perimeter. As you noted from the statistics, they're not going to be able to pound the ball inside. But what I thought was important about that game last night, and Leonard Hamilton mentioned in the post game when I asked him about their shooting, was the shots last night came out of motion. They came out of the offense. As you said, the ball didn't stick. There's been times this season where you've seen guys nothing's really happening. A guy's got the ball. There's nobody in his face. All right, well, I'll go ahead and shoot this three. Well, that's not really the kind of 3-point shooters they have. They need to be in rhythm. They need to get good looks coming through the offense. And I think last night really will show that point to those, hammer home that point. I mean, you could talk in theory all you want from coaches in a film room or in practice, but they saw it last night when they ran the offense, when they, moved the ball around, they got touches inside, kicked it outside, and got those good looks in rhythm. They can shoot the ball at a really high level, and they're going to need that confidence against a team like North Carolina. Again, you can't just have those stagnant possessions and just jack up shots. because you're not going to get any offensive rebounds. You're not going to get many offensive rebounds. So I think it's a great opportunity for Florida State. I do think the NC State game helps them, but only if they apply the same things that they applied in that game into this game.
So before I ask you about the content schedule for this weekend, Ira, a couple of housekeeping items. If you haven't yet and you see the subscribe button right here underneath this video, it's actually underneath where Ira is, hit it and then hit the bell, because every time Warchant TV goes live with a brand new product, be it the happy hour that's coming up this week or live chats with Michael Langston, Wake Up Warchant, videos like this, you'll be alerted and then you can watch it. We appreciate your support of Warchant TV and also heading over to warchant.com. So Ira, what's coming up this weekend other than obviously the North Carolina game at 12 o'clock?
Yeah, as you said, the good thing is even though it's not football season, it's not even spring football season, but with Florida State bringing in so many new players, we're actually going to get to interview Mackenzie Milton, the quarterback transfer from UCF that everybody's so excited about, and also Jermaine Johnson, the defensive end from Georgia, probably the top two players that they're bringing in on offense and defense for Florida State football in 2021 are both going to be made available to the media on Friday. So we'll have those interviews up. We'll have stories off of that. And I believe that's going to continue over the next few weeks. We're going to get to meet some of these other newcomers. They brought in 7 transfers so far, and then they've got an 8th one coming. So we'll have that coverage as well. And like you said, the basketball game on Saturday. And then also some more recruiting stuff that Michael Langston's working on as Florida State closes out this 2021 signing class.
So the only thing that rivals Florida State's shooting percentage from the field last night is probably the amount of roster turnover since Mike Norvell took to the podium a couple of Decembers ago. Look forward to all that content, obviously, at Warchant this weekend. Ira, thank you, man. It's been a pleasure. It's been a while. I'm glad that we're going to be hopefully back to doing this a little bit more routinely. Hopefully COVID doesn't stunt anything. But it was great to see your face, man. I missed you.
I missed you too. Happy New Year, Tom.
Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to everybody out there. This is the Warchant.com's Hoops Report. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.